Hello, and welcome to your YouTube channel, Learn English Lab. Today's podcast topic name is American Small Talk Mastery, How to Chat Confidently with Native Americans. So I want to start by asking you, the listener, a pretty specific question.
Oh, this is a good one.
Right. Have you ever been told by an American manager that your recent project was, really solid or absolutely great?
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like a huge win. But then maybe 3 weeks later, you find out you're basically on the verge of being fired because of that exact same project.
Which is just, it's terrifying.
It's absolute bewilderment. And if you're a non-native English speaker working in the U.S. right now, there's a really high chance you've experienced some version of this exact whiplash.
Oh, without a doubt. It happens all the time.
So today we are doing a deep dive to crack the hidden code of American office speak. Because, well, picture this. It's your first Monday morning at a new corporate job in the United States.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and you have spent years, maybe decades, mastering the English language. You've aced the TOEFL, the IELTS, you've conquered every proficiency exam out there.
Your grammar is flawless at this point.
Spot on. You understand the most obscure conditional clauses, you read complex academic texts for fun, and your vocabulary is, frankly, probably bigger than the person sitting in the cubicle right next to you.
Which is a funny irony, but totally true.
Right. So you walk in, and your new manager greets you with this enormous, gleaming smile. And they say, "Hey, welcome aboard. Super excited to have you on the team. Let's grab coffee sometime this week and get you up to speed."
And you smile back, and you're thinking, I've got this. This is going to be easy.
Yeah, it feels like a total triumph, right up until the illusion shatters.
Because it always shatters. As the days and weeks progress, you start to feel this creeping sense of disorientation.
Like something is just slightly off.
Precisely. The conversations happening in your daily stand-up meetings, they don't sound anything like the crisp, logical dialogues you studied in your textbooks.
No, not at all.
You hear colleagues saying these bizarrely contradictory things like, "I think we're totally aligned here, but I'd love to push back just a little bit."
I hear that one so much. I'd love to push back.
Right. And you watch people actively disagreeing with their superiors, yet everyone maintains this cheerful, almost relentlessly positive tone of voice.
It's wild to watch if you aren't used to it.
And then, then comes the email. The one where your boss tells you your first deliverable is looking fantastic, but, and there's always a but, attaches a document with 14 completely different structural changes.
Oh man, that email is the exact moment the panic sets in. You're sitting at your desk, staring at those 14 track changes, and you just start questioning your own reality.
You really do.
I think, are these people being honest with me? If the work is so fantastic, why on earth does it need to be entirely rewritten?
Is it just some kind of polite fiction?
Exactly. You start to suspect you're missing this invisible frequency that everyone else in the room is just naturally tuned into. And the hard truth is, well, you are.
You undeniably are.
But, and this is the most critical takeaway for you listening right now, it is not your English. Your English is spectacular. What you're missing is the cultural architecture wrapped around the English.
And that is the core mission of our deep dive today. We're exploring the hidden, unspoken rules of American workplace communication.
The stuff they don't teach you in language school.
Never. We're tailoring this conversation specifically for you, the advanced C1 or C2 level English speaker.
Yep.
You already possess the linguistic tools. What we're unpacking today is the pragmatics of professional communication.
So we're moving beyond just dictionary definitions.
Absolutely. We're looking at how meaning is actively constructed, negotiated, softened, and sometimes completely disguised in the American office.
Because knowing a language and knowing how that language operates as a tool within a specific cultural ecosystem, those are two wildly different skill sets.
They really are.
I think the best way to frame this is, with a game of chess.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Yeah, so learning English grammar, memorizing vocabulary, mastering syntax, that is essentially like learning how the pieces move on the board. The knight moves in an L shape. The bishop is confined to its color.
You know the rules of the game.
Right. But understanding cultural pragmatics, that is like understanding the intense psychological warfare of the person sitting across from you.
Ooh, yeah.
It's knowing the unwritten etiquette of the tournament hall. Like, when is it considered rude to not offer a draw? Or how do you resign with dignity?
That's a great way to put it.
If you only know how the pieces move, but you don't understand the psychology of the players, you're going to lose the game. You won't even understand why.
That chess analogy really hits the nail on the head because the American communicative framework isn't just a random assortment of friendly-sounding idioms.
It's not just small talk for the sake of it.
No, it's the direct manifestation of a very specific set of historical and cultural values. We're talking about deep-seated individualism, this pioneer-era optimism, a fierce belief in egalitarianism, and the absolute necessity of self-advocacy.
Which are huge concepts.
They are. And these aren't just abstract ideas you read about in a sociology textbook. They are active forces that dictate every single interaction in the office.
Every single one.
They determine how an agenda is set in a boardroom, how a manager delivers a performance review, and even the tiny micro-interactions you have while waiting for the microwave in the break room.
And if you want to advance in your career, grasping this stuff is just non-negotiable.
Spot on. Organizational behavior studies consistently reveal a pretty stark divide. Professionals who decode these cultural norms advance exponentially faster. They secure better mentorships, and they experience far higher job satisfaction.
While those who don't decode it, even if they're the most technically brilliant engineers or financial analysts in the whole building, they end up feeling incredibly isolated.
It's really unfortunate.
It is. If you arrive from a cultural background where professional virtue is defined by modesty, where hierarchy is visually obvious and strictly respected, or where, staying silent during a meeting is actually a profound sign of active listening and respect,
the American office is going to feel like stepping onto another planet.
Literally another planet.
Yeah.
You might take an American colleague's polite hedging at face value and completely miss a critical warning. Or, conversely, you might interpret their loud, casual brainstorming as aggressive or disrespectful.
And the tragic result is that brilliant people get passed over for promotions they absolutely deserve.
Yeah. And the most frustrating part for you, the listener, is that no one in that office is actively trying to deceive you. They're just running on a fundamentally different cultural operating system.
Which brings us to the first massive glitch non-native speakers encounter when trying to interface with this new operating system. And that is the profound paradox of American directness.
Oh, this is a big one. Let's acknowledge the global stereotype first, right? Worldwide, Americans are perceived as loud, bold, brash, and relentlessly direct.
Very true.
And in many contexts, that stereotype holds up. Compared to high-context communication cultures in East Asia or the Middle East, Americans will seem incredibly blunt.
They'll tell you their professional goals within 5 minutes of meeting you.
Yeah, they'll voice their opinions loudly in a crowded room. They will walk up to a senior executive at a networking mixer, stick out their hand, and introduce themselves with a level of informal confidence that borders on shocking for a lot of international professionals.
Right. The global image is the loud American executive banging on the table saying, here's the problem, here's what I want, and here's how we're going to fix it.
Exactly. But that stereotype is actually a trap, isn't it? Because the moment you assume Americans are always direct, you walk right into a massive cultural landmine.
You really do. Because that famous directness has a very rigid, invisible boundary. And that boundary is drawn the very second the conversation turns to negativity.
Wait, so the directness just evaporates?
It does. When Americans are dealing with positive feedback, self-promotion, or expressing enthusiastic agreement, they are as direct as the stereotype implies. But the moment they need to deliver criticism, express fundamental disagreement, or give you bad news, their communication style abruptly shifts.
They suddenly become completely different people.
They become highly indirect, evasive, and reliant on heavily cushioned language. In fact, when it comes to delivering negative feedback, Americans are often far more indirect than their British, German, or Australian counterparts.
Which is so counterintuitive. This creates a crazy whiplash effect for the non-native speaker. The loud, blunt culture you thought you were navigating suddenly turns into this maze of polite hints and gentle suggestions.
I think we need to ground this in a real-world scenario because the subtlety of this shift is exactly where careers get derailed. Let's look at the case study of Priya and Jake.
Okay, let's dive into this. This is a classic example of this paradox in action. So Priya is a highly accomplished, brilliant software engineer who recently relocated from Hyderabad to join a major tech firm in San Francisco.
Okay.
She is exceptionally competent and confident in her technical abilities. So it's time for her first major code review. Her American colleague, Jake, who's technically a peer but has been at the company longer, sits down to review her work.
This is where it gets tricky.
Right. He looks at her screen, smiles, and says this, And I want you, the listener, to pay attention to the exact phrasing here because every single word is doing heavy lifting.
Oh yeah, every word matters.
Jake says, "This is really great work, Priya. I love the structure here. I'm wondering, though, have you considered maybe approaching the authentication module a little differently? Just a thought, totally up to you."
Wow. Let's pause and forensically examine what is happening inside Priya's head in that exact moment.
Please do, because it's a lot.
She hears really great work, and I love the structure. Coming from a cultural background that values clear, direct instruction from superiors and values modesty, she takes this praise literally.
Of course she does. It sounds like high praise.
Right. She registers a strong, unequivocal endorsement of her overall project. Then she hears Jake's comment about the authentication module. But look at the linguistic packaging he uses.
I'm wondering, maybe approaching a little differently, just a thought, totally up to you.
Priya processes this as a minor, entirely optional suggestion, an alternative pathway that Jake thought of, but one she is under no obligation to take, especially since he concluded with the phrase, "totally up to you."
Yeah, that phrase is a killer.
So she weighs the suggestion, decides her original authentication module is more efficient, and chooses not to change it.
And why would she? He explicitly gave her permission not to. He said it was up to her.
Absolutely.
But then the time bomb goes off. 2 weeks later, Priya walks into her scheduled one-on-one meeting with her manager. She's relaxed, expecting to discuss her next project.
And instead,
the manager closes the door and tells her that her performance is deeply concerning. The manager reveals that Jake had flagged critical, potentially project-ruining flaws in her authentication module.
oh no.
Flaws that Jake reported he had already clearly communicated to Priya,
Yeah.
but which Priya had completely ignored.
And Priya is just absolutely stunned.
She feels gaslit. She feels betrayed. Her internal narrative is, Jake is a liar. He smiled to my face, told me it was a great project, said the change was totally up to me, and then stabbed me in the back to management.
But the psychological twist here is that Jake does not believe he lied, nor does he believe he stabbed her in the back.
Wait, really? How can he not think that?
If you asked Jake, he would tell you he was incredibly direct with Priya. From his American cultural vantage point, he used a highly standardized tool of professional communication. We call it the hedge directive.
The hedge directive.
The directive is, by definition, a command or an order. But Jake hedged it. He wrapped the mandatory order in layers of soft, accommodating language like, "I'm wondering," or "have you considered?"
So he softened the blow.
He did. But to Jake, the core undeniable message, which is, your authentication module is broken and you must fix it, was blaring like a siren. He assumes Priya understands that just a thought is code for fix this immediately.
Wait, I have to stop you there because this feels incredibly unfair to Priya. If Jake knows the module is broken, why not just say, Priya, the authentication module has a security flaw, you need to rewrite it?
It seems so simple, doesn't it?
Yeah. Why play this elaborate linguistic game of dress-up, wrapping a mandatory order in the disguise of an optional suggestion? Who benefits from this confusion?
It's a vital question, and it goes back to the deep sociology of the United States. Americans have a profound cultural aversion to the appearance of tyranny or overt domination, even in corporate hierarchies.
Oh, that makes sense. The whole history of the country is about rejecting kings and tyrants.
Spot on. They place an enormous, almost sacred value on preserving the individual autonomy and self-esteem of the person they are speaking to. For Jake to say, Priya, your code is broken, fix it, feels, to his American sensibilities, incredibly aggressive.
Like he's barking orders.
Right. It feels like he is attacking her professional dignity and treating her like a subordinate rather than a peer. So his culture has evolved this compromise. You give the order, but you provide the illusion of a choice.
Wow. The illusion of a choice.
You give what is colloquially known as the praise sandwich. You layer the harsh meat of the criticism between two thick slices of enthusiastic praise so the other person can swallow it without losing face.
Okay, so he starts with great work. That's the first slice of bread. He slips in the wondering if you consider changing it. That's the meat. And he finishes with totally up to you, the bottom slice of bread.
Exactly.
And if you haven't been trained to realize that the bread is completely fake and only the meat matters, you walk away thinking you just had a pleasant lunch. You don't realize you've been given an ultimatum.
That is undeniably true. And to truly grasp how bizarre and specific this American mechanism is, we have to look outside the US. Let's take the exact same scenario. Priya's authentication module needs to be rewritten and put Priya in an office in London and then in Sydney.
Okay, I love this. Let's do it.
Because even though they are all speaking English, the cultural pragmatics dictate entirely different realities.
All right, let's look at the British approach. I imagine Jake's counterpart in London isn't going to be giving a praise sandwich with a side of totally up to you.
Yeah.
How does the British colleague handle this?
Well, the British professional operates in a culture that values understatement, emotional reserve, and a very specific kind of coded negative feedback. A British colleague might say to Priya, right, so the overarching structure is quite solid, but I think the authentication module needs a proper rethink, to be honest.
Okay, that sounds a bit closer to what she's used to.
Now, we have to analyze this carefully. Notice the phrase, to be honest. In British office parlance, to be honest, or with the greatest of respect, is often a glaring red warning flag. It signals that the polite veneer is about to be dropped and blunt reality is incoming. Furthermore, the British colleague uses the word needs. It needs a proper rethink. That is definitively less negotiable than the American, have you considered?
That is fascinating because Americans usually think of the British as being the ultimate masters of politeness. Yet here, the British colleague is actually far more direct about the mandatory nature of the change. There's no just a thought happening.
You hit the nail on the head. And British office culture relies heavily on a rhetorical device called litotes, which is a way of stating an affirmative by negating its contrary.
Wait, what does that mean in plain English?
It's the art of aggressive understatement. If a British boss says, well, that's not bad, they actually mean it's quite good.
Oh, I see.
Conversely, if you present an idea and your British colleague says, that is a very brave proposal, you should panic.
Brave. That sounds like a compliment.
They do not mean you are courageous. They mean your idea is catastrophically stupid and will end in disaster.
Oh, wow.
Americans, by contrast, rarely use litotes in this way. They prefer absolute superlatives for the positive and heavy, confusing hedging for the negative.
Okay, so the British use understated litotes, but the requirement to change the code is clear. What happens if we fly Priya down to Australia? How does the code review play out in Sydney?
Australia provides the starkest contrast. The Australian workplace is governed by an intense cultural commitment to egalitarianism, famously encapsulated in their tall poppy syndrome awareness.
Tall poppy syndrome. That's the idea that anyone who acts superior, the tall poppy, needs to be cut down to size, right?
Absolutely. And this translates into a professional culture of bluntness, driven by the concept of mateship. In Australia, artificial politeness is often viewed with suspicion. It feels fake and untrustworthy.
So no praise sandwiches there.
Definitely no praise sandwiches. An Australian colleague reviewing Priya's code wouldn't bother with it at all. They would likely look at the screen and say, yeah, nah, Priya, that authentication bit isn't going to work, mate. It's a bit of a mess. Let's sort it out.
Yeah. Nah, it's a bit of a mess, mate. I can feel the listeners cringing right now. That sounds so aggressive. There is absolutely no cushion. Just a direct hit to the ego.
It sounds aggressive to American or Indian ears, yes.
But here is the critical cultural nuance. In Australia, there's absolutely no malice intended in that delivery.
Really? None at all?
None. The bluntness is actually a sign of respect and inclusion. The Australian operating assumption is, we are mates, we are equals. I don't need to wrap my feedback in a polite little bow because I respect you enough to give it to you straight, and I know you're tough enough to handle it without taking it personally.
This just illuminates the terrifying tightrope our listeners are walking. Think about the mental gymnastics required here. You have mastered the vocabulary of the English language, but the underlying message, your code is broken and you must fix it, is being violently distorted through 3 completely different cultural prisms.
It's exhausting just thinking about it. The British use understated negation. The Australians use aggressive egalitarian bluntness, and the Americans use the deceptive praise sandwich and the hedge directive. And none of these cultures provide a dictionary for this behavior.
Nope, you're just supposed to know it.
The American way isn't objectively better or more moral, but if your paycheck is coming from an American company, it's the only rule book that matters.
That is the harsh reality. You have to play the board you are sitting at. And understanding the American board brings us to the second, perhaps most exhausting dimension of their workplace culture. The relentless performance of enthusiasm and positivity.
Oh boy. If any of our listeners have spent even an hour on an American corporate Zoom call or read an American Slack channel, You know exactly what we are talking about.
The exclamation points alone.
The sheer volume of exclamation points, the excessive use of adjectives. Americans seem extraordinarily, almost uncomfortably, enthusiastic about mundane corporate tasks.
It is so true. You log into a meeting and someone says, I am so incredibly excited to dive into these Q3 compliance metrics.
Or you suggest changing a font color on a slide deck from blue to slightly darker blue, and your manager responds with, oh my gosh, I absolutely love that idea.
Like, it's the best idea they've ever heard.
Yes. And if you are coming from Germany or Japan or Eastern Europe cultures where professional competence is signaled by being serious, measured, and stoic, this performative joy feels insane.
It really does.
You sit there thinking, are these people unwell? Nobody in the history of humanity has ever been thrilled about compliance metrics. This has to be completely fake.
The feeling that it is fake is the most common grievance I hear from international professionals. But it is crucial that we reframe this. In the United States, enthusiasm is not necessarily a reflection of deep internal emotional state. It functions as an essential social currency.
Okay, social currency. Explain that.
Historically, going back to the expansion of the American frontier, you had diverse groups of strangers constantly encountering one another and needing to build immediate short-term trust to conduct business or survive.
Right, because there wasn't a rigid, established social structure out west.
Exactly. Showing overt positive effect, smiling widely, expressing eagerness became the default mechanism for signaling, I am safe, I am cooperative, and I am a willing partner. Fast forward to the modern corporation, and this mechanism is still in overdrive. Expressing enthusiasm proves you are a team player. It proves you are engaged.
So if you don't participate in that exchange of currency, you aren't just seen as quiet. You are seen as a threat to the harmony of the group.
Without a doubt. If you sit in that meeting and simply nod soberly when the new project is announced, your American colleagues do not think, what a serious, focused professional.
Oh, they think.
They think, wow, he hates this project, he's disengaged, he might even be hostile. Your internal state might be one of deep focus, but in America, perception is reality. If you don't broadcast enthusiasm, they assume you have none.
I want to introduce an analogy here to help listeners really grasp the mechanics of this. Think about economic inflation.
Oh, this is a great comparison.
If you look at the inflationary language of American tech and corporate culture over the last 2 decades, the value of positive words has plummeted because there are so many of them in circulation. Imagine an economy where massive inflation means a basic cup of coffee costs $100.
Okay, tracking.
You walk into the cafe. You personally believe a cup of coffee is only truly worth $1. But if you slap a single $1 bill on the counter, the barista is not going to give you the coffee. You can argue about the philosophical value of the coffee all day, but the market rate is $100. You are underpaying.
That is a phenomenal way to explain it.
Right, so in the U.S. workplace, the baseline of emotional currency is massively inflated. Americans don't just like a proposal, they love it. They aren't just okay with the timeline, they are thrilled.
The strategy isn't acceptable, it is phenomenal, and the team is 100% aligned.
Exactly. So if your boss presents a new initiative and you respond with a measured, yes, that seems like a reasonable approach, you are offering a $1 bill for a $100 coffee. You are severely underpaying socially. Your boss will walk away thinking you are deeply pessimistic about the initiative.
The inflation is real, and the cost of not matching it is professional marginalization. So what is the actionable path forward for our listeners who feel deeply uncomfortable with this?
Yeah, how do we fix this?
It is a dual process. First, you must fundamentally recalibrate how you interpret what Americans say. When your colleague says, I would love to help you with that data poll, you have to adjust for inflation.
So they don't actually love data polls.
No. The word love here does not denote deep emotional desire. It merely signifies a baseline cooperative spirit. It absolutely does not mean they're going to drop their own priorities to do your work. You must strip away the inflationary adjectives to find the actual commitment level beneath.
That makes a lot of sense.
Second, and this is where the real work begins, you have to adjust your own communicative output upward.
But wait, I have to push back on this on behalf of the listener. Because if I am naturally an introverted person, or if my culture taught me that boasting and excessive emotion are signs of immaturity, telling me to just be 20% more enthusiastic feels like you are asking me to lie.
I hear that all the time.
It feels like asking me to put on a clown suit and perform a circus act just to get my paycheck. How do we overcome that psychological friction?
It is a profound friction, and your resistance is entirely valid. The shift in mindset happens when you stop viewing it as faking an emotion and start viewing it as translating a register.
Translating a register.
Think of it like a dress code. If you go to the beach, you wear a swimsuit. If you go to a corporate boardroom, you wear a suit. When you put on the suit, you are not betraying your authentic self. You are simply donning the appropriate attire for the context.
You're just matching the environment.
Spot on. You are showing respect for the environment's norms. Adjusting your enthusiasm upward is just the linguistic equivalent of putting on the suit. You aren't lying about your feelings. You are choosing the specific vocabulary and tone required to ensure your actual competence is accurately perceived by the local audience. You are translating your baseline engaged into their dialect of thrilled.
Translating a register. I like that. It removes the moral judgment of feeling fake. You are just speaking their dialect. Okay, let's move from the exhausting performance of enthusiasm to something even more treacherous. Let's talk about power.
Power dynamics.
We need to unpack what the sociologists call performative egalitarianism and the trap of hidden hierarchies.
This is perhaps the most fascinating and contradictory element of the American workplace. If you look at an American office on the surface, it appears to be a glorious utopia of democratic equality.
It really does.
The visual and linguistic markers of hierarchy are systematically erased. Everyone calls everyone by their first name. The summer intern calls the 50-year-old CEO Dave. The dress code is aggressively casual. Dave is probably wearing a fleece vest and sneakers.
And the language of management is saturated with egalitarian slogans, like, I really value your perspective, we are all equals on this team, there are no bad ideas, and the ultimate classic, my door is always open.
If you come from a culture where you have to use formal honorifics for your boss, where seating arrangements in a meeting room are strictly determined by rank, and where publicly disagreeing with a superior is an act of professional suicide, walking into Dave's office feels like a breath of fresh air.
It feels liberating. You think, wow, everyone is just a team of equals collaborating.
But it is an illusion, and it is a dangerous one. Beneath that casual first-name basis, fleece vest-wearing surface, there are rigid, brutal power dynamics constantly operating.
The hidden hierarchies.
Yes. Sociologists refer to these as hidden hierarchies. The power hasn't vanished. It has merely been driven underground and encoded in subtle behaviors. The challenge for the international professional is that the unspoken rules of power are wrapped in these egalitarian lies.
Oh, this is so tricky. Give me an example.
Take the phrase, my door is always open. It sounds like an invitation for total transparency, but nobody's going to explicitly hand you the addendum that says, my door is always open for highly strategic, pre-scheduled conversations that make me look good, but absolutely not for you to stroll in on a Tuesday afternoon to complain about a minor tech issue.
Oh, undeniably true. Or think about the brainstorming session. The manager kicks off the meeting by saying, all right, team, let's brainstorm, throw it all at the wall, all ideas are welcome. But there is a massive invisible asterisk hovering in the air next to that sentence.
A massive asterisk. The invisible text reads, all ideas are welcome, provided they demonstrate a keen awareness of our quarterly strategic objectives, do not challenge my ultimate authority, and most importantly, do not waste the executive's time.
Right. If you, taking the egalitarian invitation literally, start throwing out half-baked ideas just to participate, because you believe there are no bad ideas, you will be silently judged.
Harshly judged.
Your colleagues will smile enthusiastically, but behind the scenes, the hidden hierarchy is evaluating your lack of strategic filter and deciding you are not leadership material.
That is so Machiavellian.
It is. The system demands that you pretend the hierarchy doesn't exist while simultaneously punishing you if you fail to respect it. And this performative egalitarianism creates a massive problem when it comes to the concept of self-advocacy.
It really does.
Let's dig into this because this goes against the core values of so many cultures globally. In many places, self-promotion is viewed as inherently arrogant, boastful, and deeply unseemly.
The prevailing wisdom is a meritocratic ideal. Put your head down, do excellent work, and the work will speak for itself.
The manager's duty is to notice your brilliance and reward you. If you bring that work speaks for itself mindset to an American office, what is the outcome?
The outcome is that you will be invisible. In the United States, the belief in individualism means that you are the sole CEO of your own career. Because the culture pretends everyone is equal, the assumption is that everyone is equally responsible for broadcasting their own value.
So no one is looking out for you but you.
Spot on. If you execute a brilliant, complex project flawlessly, but you never mention it to leadership, the American management mind does not think, oh, what a humble, dedicated worker.
They make one of two highly damaging assumptions.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
They either assume you don't actually understand the value of what you produced, meaning you lack strategic vision, or they assume you lack the confidence to own your success, meaning you are not strong enough for leadership. In America, if you don't claim the credit, someone louder eventually will.
But how do we navigate this? Because it's not like Americans enjoy working with egomaniacs either. You can't just kick the door open, point to yourself and scream, I am the smartest person in this building, give me a promotion.
No, absolutely not.
There is a penalty for arrogance. So where's the line? How do you advocate for yourself without sounding like a narcissist?
The secret lies in finding the linguistic sweet spot of objective self-advocacy. You need to use language that firmly stakes your claim to the success, but strips away the subjective, boastful adjectives.
So sticking to the facts.
Exactly. It is about stating facts, not opinions about yourself. For example, instead of saying something subjective like, I did an amazing job and carried the whole team on this project, you shift to objective action verbs.
Like what?
You say, I led the data integration initiative, or my analysis identified the key cost-saving opportunity, or I spearheaded the transition to the new platform. Notice the mechanics of those sentences.
I led. My analysis identified. I spearheaded.
You are putting yourself as the active subject of the sentence, linking yourself directly to the positive outcome, but you aren't calling yourself a genius. You are simply stating the empirical facts of your contribution. This is how you claim your space in the hidden hierarchy while maintaining the polite team player facade.
My analysis identified the key opportunity. That is so clean, it's undeniable, it's professional, and it forces management to recognize your exact role without you having to throw a parade for yourself.
It works beautifully.
And knowing how to deploy these specific verbs and phrases brings us to a crucial part of our discussion, which is the actual vocabulary. Because textbook English completely fails to prepare you for the bizarre, idiomatic reality of the American office.
It really does.
Your grammar book taught you how to conjugate verbs, but it didn't teach you the violent slang of corporate America. Let's start with a phrase we see everywhere: high stakes.
High-stakes communication is a phrase that perfectly captures the underlying tension of the American workplace. The term originates directly from gambling and poker.
Like putting all your chips on the table.
Exactly. If you are playing a high-stakes game, it means the minimum bet is enormous. The potential for wealth is huge, but the risk of catastrophic loss is equally high. When Americans refer to a meeting, a negotiation, or a presentation as high stakes, they are acknowledging that the friendly, fleece vest-wearing facade is dropping.
Things are getting real.
Yes. There is money, reputation, and career survival riding on the outcome of that specific interaction.
And when a high-stakes situation goes horribly wrong, the vocabulary Americans reach for is truly staggering. Let's go back to our story of Priya from the beginning.
Oh, poor Priya.
When Priya walked into her manager's office expecting a normal chat, and instead found out Jake had secretly reported her code as a disaster, the text says she was blindsided. Where exactly does that word come from, and why do Americans use it so much in business?
Blindsided is a highly evocative term that originates from American football. In football, the quarterback is the player holding the ball, looking down the field to make a pass. Their vision is focused forward.
Okay, so they can't see behind them.
Right. But if a massive 300-pound defensive player manages to bypass the blockers and smashes into the quarterback from the side they cannot see, their blind side, the impact is sudden, violent, and devastating. The quarterback never saw it coming.
Ouch.
So when an American says they were blindsided in a meeting, they aren't just saying they were surprised. They are conveying a sense of sudden, shocking professional violence. They are saying they were hit with damaging information they had no way of anticipating or defending against.
The imagery is so violent. And it gets worse. If Priya had lost her temper in that meeting, if she had started yelling at her manager or calling Jake a liar, she would run the risk of torpedoing her career.
Exactly. Torpedoing is a direct lift from naval warfare.
Yeah.
A submarine beneath the ocean's surface fires a torpedo to breach the hull of an enemy ship, sinking it entirely.
That's intense for a Tuesday morning staff meeting.
In the corporate context, if you torpedo a relationship, a project, or an initiative, it implies that with one sudden destructive action, you have completely sunk something that took months or years to build.
I just have to pause and marvel at the absolute psychological dissonance of this. Think about what we've discussed for the last 40 minutes.
It's quite a contrast.
We have established that American corporate culture demands an exhausting performance of unrelenting positivity. You must use soft, gentle, hedged directives to avoid hurting anyone's feelings. You must exclaim how thrilled you are about compliance metrics. You have to pretend everyone is an equal mate in a flat hierarchy.
Yes, all of that.
It is a culture obsessed with the aesthetic of safety and enthusiasm. Yet the moment that illusion cracks, the moment real failure, surprise, or conflict occurs, they instantly abandon the soft language and reach for hyper-aggressive metaphors from full-contact sports, gambling, and literal naval warfare. Why? Why the massive contrast?
That dissonance is the defining characteristic of American capitalism. The aggressive idioms, the torpedoes, the blindsides, the high stakes reveal the underlying truth of the system.
The reality beneath the fleece vests.
Spot on. It is a fiercely competitive, individualistic, high-pressure environment where people are constantly fighting for resources, promotions, and survival. The football and warfare metaphors are the honest language of the system.
So what's all the positivity for?
The extreme positivity, the forced enthusiasm, the polite hedging, that is the mandatory anesthetic applied over the system to keep everyone from going crazy. It is the social lubricant required to make the intense competition bearable day to day.
Wow. Mandatory anesthetic.
To master American communication, you have to be bilingual in both. You must speak the soft language of the anesthetic while understanding the violent reality of the underlying game.
That is a chilling but incredibly clarifying way to look at it. The positivity is the anesthetic.
Okay.
We have explored the deep theory, the psychology, and the vocabulary. But theory without practice leaves our listeners exactly where they started.
Right, we need to make this actionable.
Let's move to the American feedback deco. If I am an international professional listening to this on my commute right now, what are 3 specific behavioral changes I can make the second I walk into my office?
Let's give you 3 highly actionable tools. Practice number 1, the pivot. This is your defense mechanism against the praise sandwich.
Okay. How does the pivot work?
You need to retrain your brain's listening priorities. When an American colleague or boss is giving you feedback and they begin with a glowing, enthusiastic assessment of your work, I want you to mentally tune it out as background noise. Do not absorb it.
Just ignore the praise completely.
Pretty much. Instead, act like a radar dish standing for one specific type of word, the pivot word. You are listening for but, however, though, that said, or I'm just wondering if...
You're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Exactly. You must internalize this unbreakable rule. Everything spoken before the pivot word is purely social and aesthetic. It is designed to soothe your ego. Everything spoken after the pivot word is the actual unvarnished message.
Okay, give us an example.
So if your manager says, listen, your presentation skills are phenomenal and the client loved your energy, but the financial projections in the appendix are a bit confusing, you must immediately translate that in your head.
The message is not, you gave a great presentation.
No. The message is, your math is wrong and you need to fix the financial appendix immediately.
Ah, I see. What about with colleagues?
If a colleague says, I love this software vendor you found, it looks amazing, I think we might want to hold off for this quarter, though. They are not saying, ask me again in 3 months. They are telling you, no, we are not buying this. The pivot word is the only truth in the sentence.
That is like giving our listeners X-ray vision. You just look right through the praise and see the skeleton of the demand.
It's a lifesaver.
All right, practice 2, enthusiasm calibration. We talked about translating the register, but how do we practically do that without feeling ridiculous?
This requires a bit of private, active self-monitoring. I want listeners to try a physical exercise this week. Imagine a colleague just messaged you a new idea for organizing the shared team drive. Nothing world-changing, just a solid, helpful idea.
Okay, organizing a shared drive.
In your normal, culturally comfortable baseline professional tone, record yourself on your phone responding to it. Listen back. If you hear a measured, calm, stoic voice saying, yes, that seems like a logical approach, let's proceed, I want you to delete it.
Delete it immediately.
Now re-record it, but consciously inject exactly 20% more energy into your delivery. Raise the pitch of your voice slightly, speak just a fraction faster, and use an inflationary adjective. Try saying, oh, I really like that approach. That's going to make things so much easier for us.
Even just hearing you demonstrate that, the difference is profound. The first version sounded like a robot confirming a command. The second version sounded like a human being collaborating.
And again, to combat the feeling of being fake, Remember, you are just adjusting the dial on the amplifier. You aren't changing the song. You still agree with the idea. You are just broadcasting that agreement on the frequency the American receiver is tuned to pick up. Practice this in the mirror until the 20% boost feels like muscle memory rather than a performance.
Okay, final tool. Practice 3. Self-advocacy mastery. We know we have to claim our space in the hidden hierarchy, but the psychological barrier to bragging is so high. Where do we start?
You start with the lowest hanging fruit, learning how to accept a compliment without destroying your own value.
Oh, this is so hard for so many people.
This is the hardest habit to break for people from modest cultures. The next time a superior praises your work publicly in a meeting, you must suppress the cultural reflex to deflect. You must banish phrases like, "Oh, it was nothing," or "I was just doing my job."
Or the most dangerous one, "I can't take the credit, the whole team really did the heavy lifting."
Yes, kill that phrase immediately. In American culture, if you constantly tell people you didn't do the work, eventually they will believe you. Instead, you must practice confident, objective acceptance.
What does that sound like?
You look them in the eye and say, "Thank you, I put a lot of thought into the architecture of that project," or "I appreciate that. It was a complex challenge, and I'm really pleased with how the analysis turned out."
Let's dissect why that phrasing is so brilliant. Thank you, I put a lot of thought into it. It accomplishes two vital things simultaneously. First, it is polite. You are graciously accepting the gift of the compliment.
But second, and most importantly, it reinforces your competence and your labor. You are reminding the room that the successful outcome was not an accident, it was not luck, and it was not solely the team's doing.
It was the direct result of your intellectual effort. You are owning the win without sounding like a tyrant.
Absolutely. It is the perfect balance of grace and self-advocacy. Now, I want to turn the focus directly to you, the listener, right now. I want you to engage in a moment of active reflection.
Take a second and think about this.
Think back over your recent professional history. Whether you are physically in a U.S. office or dealing with American clients remotely over Zoom. Can you pinpoint a specific moment where these hidden rules caused friction?
A moment where you missed a hedged directive, like Priya did.
Or a moment where someone misread your calm focus as negative disengagement? Or a moment where you gave away the credit for a major win because you thought it was the polite thing to do?
We've all been there.
Without any self-judgment, look at that memory through the lens we have built today. Ask yourself, knowing what I know now about the pivot word, the inflation of enthusiasm, and the hidden hierarchy, what exactly would I say differently if I could replay that moment?
Taking the theory and directly mapping it onto the scars of your own lived experience is how you truly internalize this framework. Because what we have undertaken today has been a massive psychological and linguistic journey.
We covered a lot of ground.
We started by dismantling the myth that perfect grammar equals perfect communication. We explored the deep historical American values of individualism and autonomy that necessitate the confusing, indirect praise sandwich when delivering bad news.
And we traveled to London and Sydney to prove that the exact same English words mean completely different things depending on the cultural operating system running in the background.
We unpack the exhausting necessity of performative enthusiasm and why you have to inflate your emotional currency just to break even in the American market.
We exposed the myth of the flat office, revealing the hidden hierarchies where power is obscured behind fleece vests and open doors, demanding that you master the delicate art of objective self-advocacy just to survive.
And we mapped the bizarre dissonance of a culture that demands relentless, soft positivity, but relies on the violent language of torpedoes and blindsides the moment the stakes get high.
It's a lot to process. But hopefully we have armed you with the actual tools to fight back. The radar for the pivot word, the 20% energy boost, and the exact phrasing to own your success without feeling like an egomaniac.
And hopefully those tools make Monday morning a little less terrifying.
As a final affirmation to you, the listener, I want to reiterate that the American workplace culture is not morally superior, nor is it inherently worse than the culture you were raised in. It is simply a different construct.
There's different rules for a different game.
You already possess the incredible, hard-won asset of advanced English fluency. What you are constructing now, by engaging with this deep dive, is true intercultural communicative competence. This is the ultimate superpower.
It really is.
It is the ability to walk into any room, read the invisible power dynamics, decode the real message hidden inside the polite noise, and present your absolute best professional self. You do not have to abandon your heritage or lose your core identity. You are simply mastering a new, highly specialized dialect that allows your true brilliance to be recognized on this specific playing field.
That is the perfect way to frame it. A new dialect for a specific playing field. We started this hour by having you imagine sitting at your desk, staring at an email full of tracked changes, wondering if you were missing a hidden code. Well, now you have the cipher. You know how the game is played.
You're ready for it.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to turn over in your mind on your commute or while you finish your coffee. We know from linguistics that the language we use actively shapes the way we perceive reality.
Oh, this is a deep question.
So, if you spend 40, 50, or 60 hours a week constantly speaking and operating in this heavily coded, highly enthusiastic, perfectly hedged American corporate dialect, how long does it take before that language starts to change the way you internally process your own personal successes and failures?
Does the mask become the face?
If you constantly perform the enthusiasm, does it eventually become real? Does the cultural mask you wear at the office eventually become your face? Think about it. Please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.